What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my early thoughts ahead of Game Week 24. So I'm going to go through double Game Week options from both Everton and Liverpool, some notes from the weekend, and talk through my initial thinking around moves for my own team as well. Some of you might have noticed this video is out a day earlier than normal, and there's no stream on Sunday. Basically, there was a really bad storm in the early hours of Friday morning in Ireland, one of the worst they've ever had, and it knocked out my power and internet for more than 48 hours. It's back now, which is why I can make this video, but I didn't want to run the risk of it going down again and not being able to stream tonight and then possibly not being able to make a video tomorrow. I thought, while I've got it right now, just do the video and at least there's some content out there, and then hopefully the rest of the week I can do the regular content that I always would. And the reason I'm worried is my power came back on Saturday night and about 10 minutes later it went again. I'm sure it's fine now, but I just didn't want to run the risk, which is why I'm putting this video out at 9 o'clock once the Fulham and Man United game is finished. I am recording it just before all the matches have finished, so the West Ham Villa game is currently in progress, Fulham Man United to play later. Anything that I miss from those games, I will just cover in other videos. So thank you for bearing with me. From next week, regular content should be there, although I might not be able to stream next Sunday either, but we'll come to that next week. Anyway, getting into it. So I think a lot of the chat this week will be around which double game week players to buy. So let's start with Everton. I think the three main options to look at are probably Njai, Mykolenko and Pickford. With Njai, you've got a 5.4 million forward, and with Calvert-Lewin out of the picture, it looks like Njai will be on penalties. Now, Calvert-Lewin isn't officially confirmed out for the double yet. He's only orange flag, not red. But it seems very unlikely that he'd make the first game in double game week 24 and potentially could be out even longer because it's a hamstring problem. So as a cheap forward who could become your eighth attacker, Njai is worth looking at, especially with penalties, but the underlying numbers are just terrible. They are really bad for an attacker. And he's one of those players that I think on the eye looks pretty good when he plays, but 0.12 expected goals per 90 is awful for an attacker. 0.05 expected assists. My main worry about him is, once you get past the double in 24, you're probably not going to be that happy with him in your team. And you could argue the same thing about Calvert-Lewin, who I bought last week, by the way. But I think even more so of Njai. At least Calvert-Lewin's got some stats to be somewhat hopeful of from open play. It's just not really there with Njai. Now, with Leicester at home, there is potential for points there. But the Liverpool game's obviously going to be tough. After that, the Everton fixtures aren't that bad, but I'm really not sure how many times I would want to play him. Like Palace away in 25, Man United at home in 26, Brentford away in 27, Wolves away in 28, and then West Ham at home in 29. So Everton do play in the blank. I think if you are being forced into having to buy a new forward this week and you need someone cheap, I'd probably go for him just because you got the double right in front of you. But for most people, whichever forwards you've got, like Mateta, Chris Wood, Visser, etc., Isak, you almost certainly don't need to sell them to Njai. So he's probably the best attacker to go for at Everton. I think going for no Everton attackers is probably a strategy to think about. Defensively, I'd be a little bit more happy with them, especially someone like Mykolenko, because at 4.4 million, he can be benched. A little bit annoying that he's already risen from 4.3 million, but 4.4 is still pretty cheap. He's not massively attacking, but you can just play him in the double and then choose which games to play him afterwards. I think looking from a defensive point of view, if you had to play him against teams like Palace away, West Ham at home in 29, Wolves away in 28, it's not the end of the world. Everton already have quite a few clean sheets so far this season. So I quite like that pick because you're not having to have him in the back three all like every single game week. And then Pickford's always been fairly consistent. The one thing to say, by the way, is Pickford and Njai might go up in price tonight. So if you're absolutely sure they're going to come in and you've got transfers to spare, I'd think about moving early on them. It's something that I'm going to have to consider as well. I think long term, I still quite like having Raya from the Arsenal defence. Because I think after the Man City game, Arsenal defensive fixtures are pretty good again, especially with Saliba back. But if I'm going for a different goalkeeper right now, I'm almost certainly buying Pickford. And I think the thing with him over like a Mykolenko is you've got the save point potential even in these more tricky games. So even if you get stuck with him for a while, it's really not the end of the world. And when you look at goalkeeper points in general for the season, like he's on 95. He's only 4 behind Sells. So he's the second highest scoring keeper. I just don't see why that wouldn't continue. I'm not saying he'll definitely be the second highest scorer by the end of the season, but he'll be right up there. He always is. So Njai maybe if you really need a forward. Otherwise, I go Mikolenko or Pickford. You could look at like Branthwaite, Tarkowski. But I just wouldn't like to pay that extra price over Mikolenko. Like Tarkowski's no slouch from set pieces, for example, in terms of goal threat. But I don't think you want to spend that much on an Everton defender because you're probably not going to want to play them a huge amount after the double. So I suspect a lot of people will already be tripled up on Liverpool following the Ipswich game in game week 23. But just in case you're not, let's go through the best options. Quick reminder, first of all, the fixtures they've got coming up. So double game week in 24 is Bournemouth away and Everton away. Then you've got Wolves at home in 25. Man City away in 26 probably looks a little bit trickier than it did a few weeks ago. But straight after that, you've got back-to-back home games against Newcastle and Southampton. So after the double, it's 3 home games in 4. Wolves, Newcastle, Southampton. That looks pretty decent. If Liverpool beat Spurs in the Carabao Cup semi-final, which is looking quite likely the way the two teams are playing right now, they would blank in 29. But the fixtures are so good beforehand, there's really no excuse for not being on a triple up, in my opinion, from game week 24. So Salah's a no-brainer. Most people own him at this point. The second best option for me, I think, has to be Trent. The minutes are there. Conor Bradley does not look like he's going to be starting Premier League games anytime soon. He picks up another attack and return against Ipswich. Okay, he didn't get the clean sheet. That's now his 7th attack and return of the season. And they've had a number of clean sheets along the way. I just think he looks great. Even if they do concede, you've got that attacking potential on top. He looks nailed. I think he has to be the second best option after Salah. As always, by the way, if you want to go for a different triple up, you absolutely can. Like, these things will end up being very close. It might even be that a Diaz, Gakpo, Salah triple up on attack ends up being the best route. But I think looking at it right now, I would definitely have Trent second to Salah. Then I've got Gakpo ahead of Van Dijk. I suspect some of that thinking is because I made the other way, the choice the other way around in game week 23, and it's massively backfired with Gakpo's 2 goals, 1 assist against Ipswich. I guess for most people, it's just more exciting to have a second attacker than a second defender. And Bournemouth looking really good right now. So Liverpool probably going to struggle to get a clean sheet in that game. And then the Everton game is a Merseyside derby. So I can see why people would want to go for a second attacker. The minutes for Gakpo look pretty good. He did get subbed before the 70th minute against Ipswich. But the game was pretty comfortable, thanks to him being involved in some of those goals as well. So I think he'll get benched probably again in the Champions League. Even if he doesn't, he's had enough rest recently where I think he'll probably start both games in the double. And then probably that Wolves at home game in 25. And if he does, who cares about what's coming after that? There's probably going to be enough points on the table. So Gakpo ahead of Van Dijk. Van Dijk is the top defender, second to Trent, just because of security of starts and that goal threat from set pieces. I've gone for Diaz next. Again, you could just say that attackers are more exciting, so Diaz should be ahead of Van Dijk. It's just the midfield thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with Diaz as a pick whatsoever. I think his minutes are probably slightly worse than Gakpo, but not by a huge margin. I just think in the forward line, there's maybe a gap for Gakpo. In midfields, they look pretty good right now. Like, people have got like Bruno Fernandes, Anthony Gordon, Salah, Palmer, Rodgers. I've got Eze. People are going to want Mbeumo now. There's just less space than there is in the front three. So I think for that reason, I've put Diaz a little bit lower. And then I've got Konate. At 5.2 million, Konate is pretty incredible value compared to Van Dijk. And of course, he went and got an assist in the game against Ipswich, which is typical after saying about Van Dijk's, more attacking threat. Konate, the only real worry is that injury record. I think in terms of being nailed, he is. I think he's pretty much as nailed as Van Dijk when he's fit. It's just whether or not he can stay fit. If you're only looking to keep this Liverpool player for a few weeks, I think Konate is well worth the risk. Basically, the long and the short of it is, I wouldn't rip my team up to get Van Dijk. If you can get Konate a lot easier, I would just do that. And then I've got Alisson as the next pick. Don't mind a goalkeeper. The only thing I would say is Areola started the game for West Ham against Aston Villa. If he keeps his place, if you've got Alisson and Fabianski, it's quite likely you won't have a goalkeeper in 29 because Fabianski's not guaranteed to get his place back. And if Liverpool beat Spurs in the Carabao Cup final, obviously Alisson will blank. And if you're not free hitting in 29, that means you might have to make another goalkeeper transfer later. So if you can, if you're looking to play through 29 and not use a chip, I'd probably avoid Alisson. So just to go through some notes from the weekend, I think this is the kind of thing that people would have asked me had I streamed tonight. And as always, I can cover some of this in more detail in other videos this week. Bournemouth midfielders, absolutely in the points against Nottingham Forest. Utara, Cliver and Semenyo. All of them look like really good options moving forward, especially for their price points. I would say they can probably wait a week though. It is Liverpool at home in 25. And as I've just said, I do think that Bournemouth will cause Liverpool plenty of problems. They've played extremely well for most of this season. But still, Liverpool at home on paper is not a great fixture. The entry point really for them now is game week 25. If you didn't buy them before Forest at home, 25 is probably the time you want to start looking at them again. As always, if you need a new midfielder this week and you just want them for the long term, absolutely fair enough. The fixtures are good, but I wouldn't go out of your way to bring them in. Cliver on penalties and decent minutes at the moment is probably the best option, but I still like Semenyo's underlying numbers, and Utara playing out of position for his price is also decent. I think on Cole Palmer, he was one of the most sold midfielders before game week 23. I did question people doing that, but I guess it was Man City away. They did have 3 away games in the next 4. I think you've now missed the boat on that. If you wanted to sell Palmer, last week was the week to do it before they played Man City. Now you've got West Ham at home right in front of you. And then, okay, it's 2 away games, but then it's Southampton at home and Leicester at home in 27 and 28. The stats haven't been amazing in most of the recent games, but we know what he's capable of. I don't think there's a real issue there unless we find out he's got a knock or something like that. Anthony Gordon, another return against Southampton. I think for him, you can hold him for at least 1 more week. Last week, he'd been sold by like 50 or 60,000 FPL managers when I did the transfer tips video. He's still being sold this week. I think he's a pretty good option for Fulham at home. Depends who you're buying, I suppose, but generally I quite like Gordon. Sarr is definitely one to not rush out of your team, but keep an eye on. It's 67 and 71 minutes the last 2 games. SA, not Eze. I think it's SA, how you pronounce it. Came off the bench and got a goal as well. Sarr's minutes don't look completely secure right now. I don't think it's going to be a case that he's benched anytime soon, but maybe if the subs keep doing well, that could happen. So I think with Crystal Palace, the fixtures are still pretty good. Like Man United away this week is not bad in 24. Then Everton at home, Fulham away, Villa at home, Ipswich at home. Like I'm not in a mad rush to sell Eze myself. And so I wouldn't look at your team and think Sarr has to go. But the minutes are getting a little bit concerning. Marmoush started for City, 73 minutes. One to keep an eye on, but he takes up a forward spot. And I know I've just said that forward spots might be, more useful to fit a Gakpo in than Diaz in midfield. But I still think if you've got like Gakpo and Isak, you've only got one more spot. I don't think you take it up with Marmoush. I think we see how things go over the next few weeks. And also for City, it's Arsenal away, Newcastle at home, Liverpool at home next 3. That is not a great run of fixtures. So I know I said last week I wouldn't get Foden. Then Foden's gone and got another goal. But personally, I would just ignore them now with Arsenal away. It's probably the toughest game that City will have all season outside of Liverpool away. And then Brentford, if you're looking at a Vissa or an Mbeumo, this is a great week to buy them. Spurs I don't want to say big trouble. Don't want to dramatise it too much. But they lost to Everton. They've just lost to Leicester as well. They're not looking great right now. Unless they can get some players back quick. Brentford have been very good when it comes to attack this season. Mbeumo and Vissa, both great options. And after Spurs at home, it's West Ham away, Leicester away, and Everton at home. So this is a really nice entry point. I wouldn't buy any Brentford defensive players, but the 2 main attackers look like pretty decent value. So I just want to go through some initial thinking about what moves I might make for my own team in Game Week 24. Just before I do that, let me quickly show you how Game Week 23 is going. I'm currently on 65 points. The only player I've got left is Morgan Rogers, and the Aston Villa versus West Ham game is ongoing as I record. I think they're in about the 50th minute. So Rogers hasn't got me any attacker returns yet. Hopefully they're going to come later on, but I'm probably going to end up on about 66, 67 points. I've got no one left in the Fulham Man United game. That's probably going to be a red arrow, but not a massive one, hopefully. It could have been a green arrow, though, had I just bought Gakpo. And it's been an absolute killer. So I had 2 options, basically, on the team selection video I was talking about. Just do Solanke to Gakpo and roll into Game Week 24 with 5 transfers. Or do Solanke to Calvert-Lewin and Anderson to Van Dijk. In the end, I did Munoz to Van Dijk and Solanke to Calvert-Lewin because I missed the Solanke price drop on Friday and the Anderson move was exact money. And the reason I didn't do it on Friday is because I had no internet whatsoever. For anyone that hasn't seen, we had a really bad storm in Ireland, cut my internet for like 48 or I think it was more than 48 hours. But I also had no mobile coverage whatsoever. And so I couldn't make the move on Friday night. I missed that. And then when I went into town on Saturday to do the deadline stream, then I had internet. I could make the move, and I decided to do the non-Gakpo move. Do I regret it? Yes. Even in hindsight, like I'm looking at it, trying to say, was it a good move? Like sometimes you get bad outcomes, But Gakpo had the upside with Ipswich. And even if Calvert-Lewin hadn't got injured, what was he going to do for me? There's a bit of hindsight thinking there because Calvert-Lewin, if he was fit, maybe he would have got something against Leicester. But it's an absolute killer because had I got Gakpo, not only would I have got all of his points, I would have benched Rodgers, who so far hasn't got me anything, and I would have played Munoz, who I sold for Van Dijk, and Munoz got an assist after conceding against Brentford. So I'm probably down. I haven't worked it out fully because I don't really want to, but at least 15 points, I would say, maybe even slightly more. It hurts. It hurts. And the way I found out makes it even worse as well. So hardly any mobile coverage where I live. So I find out that Liverpool are winning 3-0, and I know Gakpo scored. I think I found that out. Well, I must have found it out around Saturday when the game was on. So I know he's got one return, but I also know Van Dijk's got the clean sheet. And then this morning on Sunday, my son gets signal, and he checks his team. He doesn't have the same players as me, but I checked the teams at the bottom of the FPL page to see who got assist goals and bonus points. And I see that Gakpo's got 2 goals. So that's absolutely killed me. And then as we're walking home from where he got signal, I then have another look, then see he's got an assist as well. So it's gone from 1 goal to 2 goals to actually 3 attacking returns. And so that's annoying enough. And then when I get my own signal, I then see that Calvert-Lewin's also injured. So like it was just every time I saw a new piece of information that it just got worse and worse. But you know what? I've not been massively punished by it. I may even get a small green arrow this week, at least not a massive red one, as I've said. Anyway, let's move on to Game Week 24. I've got 4 transfers, 0.4 million in the bank. I don't really want to do Calvert-Lewin to Njai. I really don't want to do that. I don't think Njai is that great of a pick, but I'm stuck for cash and I can't really get to Visser in a move that I like. So I think what I'm probably going to do this week is Raya to Pickford. I don't think Raya is a definite sell because I think after City the fixtures are pretty good. But in the meantime, you do get that Leicester game for Pickford. And I wouldn't be surprised if not that he matches Raya, but does pretty well compared to Raya up until Game Week 29. So I'm probably going to get Pickford. That's one of my 4 transfers. I'm pretty sure I'm going to buy Mykolenko as well, because I can do something like Greaves to Mykolenko. And Greaves has got Southampton, which is pretty good, but I'd rather have Mykolenko for the double. And then Calvert-Lewin out, I've only got 5.8 million to spend. Now, I could just go to Raul Jimenez at 5.7. But the fixtures are not... It is 3 home games. Sorry, no, Game Week 24. It's Newcastle away, followed by Forest at home, Palace at home. Like, it's okay, but he could blank in 29 if Spurs manage to hold on against Liverpool. I know it's unlikely, but it's possible. So I don't really want to buy him either. And I just can't afford to get to Visser. I need to find 0.5 million. Even if I keep Greaves and sell Anderson, I'm still like 0.2 million off. So I think the defender moves are definitely going to happen. The other option is just to keep Calvert-Lewin for now and just bench him and just not worry about getting Njai and have an extra transfer next week and just play Rodgers and João Pedro. I think that's okay. I'm pretty happy with most of the rest of the team. Like, Rodgers is still fine. Mbeumo's good. People are going to buy him this week, I think. Salah captain. Eze's still okay. He's got me 4 attacking returns in 5 games. Palmer I'm keeping. I've got double Liverpool defence. There's not a huge amount of problems in my team or players that I feel like I'm missing. All that being said, though, I am literally sat here with 4 free transfers. That's the perfect position to be in to deal with issues like Calvert-Lewin. And although Calvert-Lewin to Njai is an absolutely horrible transfer to have to make, even saying it out loud pains me, I feel like I'm probably going to do it. Because although Njai is not a great long-term option, he is on penalties with Calvert-Lewin out. And with the 2 home games, one of them being Leicester as well, I prefer that to both Rodgers and João Pedro. So I'm getting rid of an injured player. I'm bringing in someone that's probably going to rise in price. And I'm playing them ahead of Rodgers or João Pedro, who've got away games each in Game Week 24. So in some ways, it kind of feels okay. So I suspect I'm going to use 3 of my 4 transfers this week. Raya to Pickford, Greaves to Mykolenko, maybe Anderson, but probably Greaves, and then Calvert-Lewin to Njai. 3 Everton players from 4 transfers. It's going to go horribly wrong. I'll just say that right now. But I'm probably going to do it anyway. And then next week I'll have 2 free transfers. The thing with Njai is I probably can bench him a lot of the time. Like, the fixtures aren't terrible, as I said earlier, for Everton. But he will pretty much become my 8th attacker. Like, in Game Week 25, Morgan Rogers got Ipswich at home. More than happy to play. In game week 26, the plan will be to sell him to a Bournemouth midfielder who I'm not going to want to bench all that often. So Rogers, that's fine. I can play Rogers or the Bournemouth midfielder ahead of Njai. And João Pedro's got Chelsea at home in 25, which is not ideal. But then it's Southampton away, Bournemouth at home, Fulham at home. So as much as he hasn't been great, he is still very cheap. I'm not in a mad rush to get rid of him either. So in theory, Njai comes in for the double, then gets benched quite a lot. And if I have to use him, then I will. I don't like it. I do like going for double game week players, but I must admit, if I could get to Visser and make the other moves I want to make, I'd be very tempted to do that. I just don't want to make a fourth transfer to fund it. Like Raya to Pickford, Greaves to Mikalenko, Calvert-Lewin to Visser, and then having to sell someone else. There's not really anyone else I want to sell. And I'd rather just keep carrying transfers where I can. The other option, by the way, is just to reverse the mistake I made last week. Do Van Dijk down to Mikalenko, and then just do Calvert-Lewin to Gakpo. And then maybe just do Raya to Pickford and just have 3 Liverpool, but have Gakpo instead of Van Dijk and 2 Everton. That probably sounds quite nice, but using 2 transfers to switch a Liverpool player who I've already got in just doesn't feel great. Anyway, I'm rambling a little bit as I would be on stream. That's my current thoughts. I will cover it a bit more detail and probably a little bit more structured in the team selection video on Thursday. Thank you very much for tuning in for this one. Make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and rate 5 stars if you listen on podcast. As I said earlier, because of the storm and the stuff, I just didn't want to risk doing a stream later, so I thought I would just do a video instead, cover some of the important topics that people are thinking about going into Game Week 24, and then I'll cover all the rest of the stuff in the normal videos, transfer tips, Game Week preview, team selection, final thoughts that I've got coming up the rest of the week. So apologies for no stream. It's not going to be a regular occurrence, although I probably won't be able to stream next week either, but I'll talk about that later on this week. I wasn't going to leave it there. Hopefully you've done well in Game Week 23, especially if you bought Gakpo. Yeah, I'm off. Catch you soon.